We are here today to talk about the essays, and specifically essays for Wharton, Harvard, and Stanford. Today we have a special guest. His name is Tyler Cormney, and he has co-founded MBA Prep School. He's also the co-author of the book, How to Apply for an MBA. And one of the reasons why I'm really excited to have Tyler here talking about the essays is that he actually, besides his MBA from Harvard Business School, he also has a master's in professional writing from the University of Southern California. So he knows very much how to write in a way that will be attractive towards admissions counselors. Not only that, he has a decade of experience and has been working with thousands of applicants. So really excited to have Tyler today. Tyler, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Nathan. Thank you. Thanks for the intro. I am excited to talk to everybody today. We're gonna use some slides. We've got a lot of material to cover. I want to take you through 3 essays, Nathan said, from strategy to story. So formulating your essay strategy, sharpening that into an essay concept, and then telling a story. So if it's okay, Nathan, I'll bring up the...
Yeah, let's jump right in. We've got a lot of material to cover, and I know you've got some slides prepared, so let's go for it.
Okay, perfect. Maybe bring up the slides so you're not looking at a desert landscape.
We do like the desert landscape as well. There we go.
Good. Well, if that worked, you should be seeing the title, the title slide. Is that right? All right, perfect. So as Nathan mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton essays today. We're going to focus on one essay for each school, and I want to sort of take you guys through an approach, strategy, and how to think about the essays. Formulating a concept, which you can think of as sort of the overall design, or in a few sentences what you want to write about, and then we're going to talk about story. I'll give you a few examples of stories that have emerged from work that I've done with clients, effective stories, ones that got the admissions office interested. Nathan already introduced me, but just briefly again, my name's Tyler Cormney. The firm that I'm with is called MBA Prep School. We're an admissions consulting firm. I like to say white hat admissions consulting. It's unfortunately I have to add that these days. But the point is we work with clients to bring out the best of what they have to offer schools. And you'll see through the approach to these essays that it's really all about you telling your story. We're just there to enable that and give you some guidance about ways to think about it and ways to approach it, which is what we're going to get a little bit of a sense of today. There are 3 essay questions that we're going to talk about today. I will, just to make them clear for those of you who haven't done your research yet or haven't started these essays, I'll just quickly go through them. Harvard's going to ask you, the one and only question Harvard asks you is this: as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? Stanford has been asking a classic first essay question for, as long as I've been doing this, and that's over 13 years now. They ask what matters most to you and why. We'll talk about that and how to approach that big one. Wharton is asking you, what do you hope to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? It's kind of a classic why MBA question, but we'll talk about some of the differences maybe and how to approach and think about that particular essay. So, the title of this presentation is From Strategy to Story, and so here's your process flow chart, Nathan. You're going to start with developing the strategy. You're then going to formulate your essay concept, right? Obviously aligned with that strategy, and you're going to tell your story, right? 1, 2, 3. It's as easy as that, or as difficult as that. In terms of the essay strategy, right? So what do I mean by an essay strategy? It's really a communication strategy. I was talking to Nathan before we started today. He's studied communications. He's a journalist, right? He has to be very good at understanding his his communication strategy before he begins writing any piece. And just like him, you've got to do the same. And I would say that a great communication strategy starts with really an answer to kind of these four things at the outset, right? What's the medium or channel you're using to communicate? What's the objective? What are you trying to achieve through this communication that you're putting together? Who's your audience, and what do they care about? And you know, with the sort of the first three questions are going to be the same for all three schools, right? Your channel of communication is an essay. Your purpose at this point is to be invited to an interview, and your audience are your readers, the admissions officers. So with those things being the same, I think where it starts to get a little bit interesting, whereas, you know, essay strategy comes in, is really getting to know and understand what your audience cares about, right? What are they hoping to learn when they read this essay as part of your application? And we're going to talk about this kind of at each school, for each school, but you know, what we found is it really starts the highest level, understanding fit qualities. And you can think of fit qualities as the highest common denominators of the applicants who are admitted. These are going to be things that admissions officers at this particular school care about. Now, while there are similarities, I think you'll find there are also nuances. And so we'll talk a little bit about the fit qualities as part of each school in their essay strategy. The second thing you can do is listen to your audience. You know, these days, the admissions officers are blogging. They're being interviewed by publications like Poets and Quants. They're on podcasts. I think there's a lot of information out there. I'm gonna bring you at least like one quote that I found from each of the admissions officers of each of these schools to give you a sense of what they say they care about, right? And then studying the essay question itself, right? That's the clearest signal of what they care about, right? They've designed this essay question thoughtfully and for a reason. It's going to help them to make their decision, right? So really, you know, kind of taking apart the essay question at the beginning is very helpful in the strategy phase. And we'll do a little bit of that at a high level today, right? Understand kind of what they're asking. So then, you know, from strategy, we're going to move into the concept of the essay. This is really just, you know, essay concept's the main idea. And, you know, if you can think about it as in a few sentences, if you can describe to somebody else what you're going to say in the essay, I think you're going to be that much better prepared to write it. And I would say, you know, at this stage, you know, the thing that's the same about the essay concept for all three schools, the must-haves or the design requirements, got to answer the question asked. You want this essay to reveal who you are. I think that's something I'm going to come back to again and again on this discussion, Nathan. It's just, it's so important to think about adding to and giving that reader a sense that well, they really got to know you. You want to be original, right? That's a tall order, but that's important. And I think it's something that you'll hear from all three admissions officers if you listen. They want you something. They want extra. They want you to complement your your professional identity. They have your resume. They have reference letters. They've learned about your professional persona. So when we're going to use that essay to really add an extra dimension, and you know, your mission in life as an applicant, right, is this last point. Persuade your reader that you've got something to bring to the class or add to the class. Again, we're going to kind of go through the essays of each school. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I've worked with some clients and how they attacked, well, an approach, if you will, that I think works well for each of the essays. It all comes down at the end, as you know, I think we all know, to the story, right? And storytelling is super important. I put some teasers here, you know, journey stories, main idea stories, pivot stories, love stories. We're going to talk a little bit about these. I'm going to give you a few examples. People love sort of examples. What did somebody else write? What story did they tell? I think there's some archetypes or some forms out there that work pretty well, but I'll be the first to say there's you know, dozens of different ways you can go in the stories, but we'll talk about that. So in a second, we'll dive into the Harvard Business School essay, but I want to take a quick pause and tune back in with Nathan and see if there are any questions from folks out there in webinar land.
There's a question that we got ahead of this that I think might be important. You might go into it a little bit more, but it kind of hits upon this a little bit, and it's how personal should people get with these essays? So I'm wondering if you have any advice on that.
Right. Okay. Well, so, as I mentioned when we were talking about design requirements or the must-haves, it's so important to add to the picture that they already have the professional persona or professional identity. Okay. So by definition, that's personal territory. When folks ask how personal, and there's certainly, shades of gray here. You have to use your best judgment. This is still in some ways, Nathan, an interview on paper. So if you wouldn't feel comfortable sitting across from Chad Lossie at HBS and saying this to him, in an interview, if you don't feel like that would be an appropriate thing to share, then you've probably gotten too personal, or you've chosen material that's probably not, on topic or on point. So it's a great question. It's hard to answer in the abstract, but hopefully we can understand. There's an easier sort of don't answer here, which is, don't just recite your resume. Don't just tell them things that they already know in your reference letters. You have to break new ground.
Sure. Yeah, that's great advice. All right, let's dive into Harvard first then.
All right, the Harvard Business School essay. I guess I'm biased. I went to this school, so I've decided to give them the first cut. So the Harvard Business School essay, and there's just one, and that's been the case for a few years now. So I guess they figured this works, gives folks a very open-ended, open stage or open platform to really go in any direction and almost design your own question. So the question again just is, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy? As I mentioned, we're going to kind of start with strategy, then move into concept and kind of an approach to forming the concept and story. The start for HBS is really getting to understand their fit qualities. I pulled these directly off the HBS admissions website. Habit of leadership, analytical aptitude and appetite, and engaged community citizenship. We could spend probably a half hour just talking about fit quality. So I'm going to send folks back to the website to read this. And that's really just the starting point. Again, getting to know your audience, right? Starts with the fit quality at the highest level. But you want to have these in mind before you start this process. You want these kind of in your your bloodstream at top of mind. So I said, there's a lot written and said out there these days, luckily, for folks who are going to be tackling the HBS essay. This is a quote directly from Chad Lossie, who is the current HBS admissions director. So let's listen to kind of what he tells us what he wants. This is the audience telling you, your reader telling you what they want to know. Okay, so tell us something new. Tell us something we didn't get. It can be an experience at work, at home, some other capacity, be something you're passionate about. You can take any number of different directions, right? So he's emphasizing the open-ended nature of this question, Nathan, but he's also making it clear he wants the what else, right? Tell us something new, right? So that's the kind of first and most important test of your essay concept and your essay strategy, is that you've really kept that in mind. So in terms of essay concept, right, it's so open-ended. Where do you start? And so I recommend to my clients and to folks listening out there, start with a firm grounding what the reader already knows, right? And in fact, in our process of working with clients, we start with the resume and reference letters and to some extent the application form materials for a reason. And that's because that's going to lay the groundwork. That's going to provide the givens, the things that are already on the record. So the question, asked, and the approach then is start brainstorming. What's missing here, right? Just a few categories. There's probably 9 or 10, but maybe there are important life experiences that you want to share. or significant personal achievements, right? Things that aren't going to be found in the resume and reference guides. Maybe you have a talent or expertise that's not core to your career, but is core to who you are. Passions, interests, right? These are directionally areas that probably aren't covered by your resume. And so this brainstorming phase, like most good brainstorming phase, is going to create this long list, right, of things. How do you narrow that down? I think, again, just really grounding yourself in what HBS has asked you for, what the audience is telling you they want to know. It shouldn't be readily apparent, right, from the other application elements. It's going to be something that they care about, that HBS cares about. Maybe it is about your leadership style or approach in other settings and other venues. And it's going to differentiate you, right, from other applicants. We hope that's that is part of, like, what are you going to bring to the table? If you write about this, hopefully that sort of adds to this picture. Once you've narrowed that list, I found this is kind of where the creativity starts to come into play, but you're looking for, I would say, kind of commonalities or connections between a few of the elements, right? There's really no way to design an essay. I've never found one where you can tell them everything. But what you do find when you look at the materials, there might be some commonalities of, a pattern or some dots connecting might start to emerge for you. And then, that's the next phase. So, do you look at the other, 3 or 4 things you want to say that all kind of fit into elements of your life story? Or are these about your leadership experience and your leadership style? This is about a passion you have for music or travel or art, right, that you haven't had a chance to share yet. Is this something you really want to share, some core value or belief that's central to who you are? You'll see that started kind of crossing into Stanford territory and what matters most. But I think in some cases, this is, folks want to write about a value or a belief, and it starts to take the form of kind of a what matters to me essay. But in terms of branching, before you get into the story, I think summarizing the essay concepts, again, if you can put it down in a few sentences, this is going to be an essay about my love of art, or this is going to be an essay about the places I've traveled and how they've influenced me, or this is going to be a very short but sort of, journey story. I've been through kind of this journey in life, and it's not apparent from what you'd read in black and white on my resume, but I'm going to tell that story. And so ultimately, write the final test, I guess, to just put it on the record, but also to make it, very clear. You got to be convinced that this story is going to hit all the things we just talked about. And I really want anyone who's about to start writing to feel confident or clear in the fact that, hey, if I don't write about this, my application is going to be incomplete. I think that's the ultimate, kind of litmus test. They're going to be missing crucial information about me and what I can add to the class. That's the ultimate sort of test. And then you're ready for rough drafts, and you can really see if it works or not. But that's where you can kind of cross over from concept into story. In terms of essay stories, I like to say that, again, they start to take shape based on the material, the content. Let that content drive the story. So some stories, though, that, at a very high level that I've seen work, journey stories. We already sort of alluded to them just a moment ago. But, if you've had, your life's taken a lot of interesting twists and turns, or there have been several setbacks. I had a client who, he took a year off school. He was on track and on time, as most folks applying to HBS are, but ultimately the school he'd selected, what he was studying wasn't working, and he, I think, made a courageous choice. Like, this isn't working. I'm going to take a year off. I'm going to kind of reassess. And some things happened during that year that really provided a new direction for his life that we could then see in his story. And that, that was his journey story. A main idea story. This is kind of a thematic or topical form. I had a client who wrote about being a peacemaker. It sort of dated back to childhood, right? She was the peacemaker at home. But also we could see in different other settings where this ability to diffuse conflict, get people back on track that were, disagreeing or in conflict, was a superpower, if you will, of this particular client. Love stories, I don't mean a romance novel. I don't want you to write about, a heartbreak story. That's not, this is really like a love. Everybody uses the word passion. This is a passion that I think is, something you love that's not career centered, right? So I had a client who music was just so central to who she was. She studied, although she was a business major, she studied the opera in Italy. She was a volunteer at the symphony in kind of present day outside of work. And she taught music appreciation to kids, right? It was very clear she had this love, and I think it was pretty important about shared this love with others. Dozens of story archetypes. Nathan could probably fill in the blanks for us, but I want to give you a sense of some of the type of storytelling that I've seen work. Nathan, before we start Stanford, I want to pause again and see if you have any questions.
Yep. One thing that I think would be helpful, since you have gone through this process yourself personally, back whenever you were applying, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how the emphasis of the essay has maybe changed over the past 5, 10, 15 years for Harvard specifically. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's sort of admissions consulting administrivia, so it's more interesting to me than the average average person. But years ago, Harvard had, I think it was 6 essay questions, and the classic was tell us about 3 of your most significant accomplishments and why you view them as such. And there were career vision essays and mistake and failure essays. So it was a real writing assignment, right? Lots of opportunities to tell your story. Then they switched to introduce yourself to the class, sort of a classic. You're meeting your section mates in HBS. Your first year is spent with the same 90 folks. You're meeting them, introducing yourself for the first time. Introduce yourself, which by the way, I like that. I like that essay question a lot. Gave a lot of opportunity for folks to go into the personal, share what they loved, share what they would be bringing to the class. I think it was a really nice platform. And then we come now to the what else, and I talked to the former admissions director. There was a debate in the HBS admissions office about eliminating the essay entirely, making it completely optional or eliminating it. And I think instead they felt like that would do a lot of applicants disservice. Let's give them this open platform and see what they do with it. And I think that the design idea behind it is at HBS, it's a case study. You're going to have an opportunity to add to the discussion. You raise your hand, you get involved, you've got an open platform. How do you use it, right? I think in some ways giving folks that open platform and seeing if they use it effectively, intelligently.
Looks like we've got a frozen screen with Tyler right now. So we might have to have him log out and log back in. Tyler, we got you back.
Yeah, I think we maybe a Wi-Fi issue on my end. Are you seeing and hearing me again?
Yep, we've got you. Do you want to see if you can get your screen share back up?
Sure.
To the slides. We've had a few questions come in, and before we move on to Stanford, there we go. There's one that came in while we've been doing it, and there's a similar one that came in while leading up to.
Why is he frozen? Was that the question? Sorry.
Why is Tyler frozen? Why did Tyler disappear? We had to listen to Nathan talk for a while he was gone. No, the question is about hitting the sweet spot between sounding too pompous or elite whenever, and I was thinking of this too whenever you're talking about journey stories and main idea stories and all those different bullet points. But what are some ways in which applicants can really sell themselves without coming out too pompous or elitist, or is that a concern that they should even be having as they're thinking about crafting these essays?
Sure. Yeah, if you notice on the list of fit qualities, pompous and elitist were not listed. So yes, I think it goes without saying, avoid arrogance, avoid coming off as pompous or elitist. I think that this has to do with doing a little more showing than telling. I think when somebody tells me that they're a leader or tells me that they're sort of gifted and far and away above their peers, that's immediately off-putting. But if you're telling the story and we're seeing you in action, faced with a problem, or humbly hitting a wall or a challenge or a setback, we're going to naturally start to see your strengths come through in that way. And so the sort of old adage of show don't tell really helps, I think, to tamp that down. And I think also talking about beliefs and values and kind of honestly trying to present who you are is the second thing. And the third thing is, where lots of folks run into trouble is that, are we still live as I'm kind of talking? Yeah. Is they're trying to directly address the admissions director and get sort of tell the admissions officer what they think the admissions officer wants to hear, rather than being personal and authentic. So all three of those things can help avoid that problem you're talking about.
Okay. Yes. So now let's dive into Stanford. The iconic question: what matters to you most, and why?
Great. Let's do it. Right. I found this the most interesting and fascinating of the essay questions, and you might imagine also the most challenging. But let's start from the same place. Strategy. Okay. Understanding Stanford as an institution, culturally, what they're looking for, their fit qualities. Again, they're kind enough to put those, at least 3 of them, on the website: intellectual vitality, demonstrated leadership potential, personal qualities and contributions. Right. This is what you're going to bring to the table outside, again, of your professional achievements, accomplishments, and abilities. So let's hear what Kirsten Moss, the current HBS admissions director, had to say. Take a closer look at it. I have the great fortune to be reading what I think to be the most important story you can tell me about yourself. I learned what you care about and what experiences have shaped you as a human, right? So that's the what matters most essay that she's referring to. And I think it's the second part of the question where you really start to get a little bit of insight about what Kirsten cares about, right? She wants to know what you care about, right? She wants to know what's in your heart, what motivates you and drives you, and what experiences have shaped you as a human, right? So she doesn't want just to hear about your philosophy, your sense of purpose. That's important, but the experiences are where we see you in action, where we see what matters most to you in action. So again, facing the starting point of this essay, where do you begin? Where do you look? I've worked with a lot of different clients over the years. This is always a challenge. There's no one way to start. So I can just, the best I can do is give them a few places to start looking, and trailheads, if you will. And then they have to kind of go into the search themselves. So I have these 3: follow your struggles, follow your decisions, follow your bliss. And I'll tell you briefly about each one of those. In terms of the struggles, it's thinking about times you were in conflict, you were under pressure. There's a dramatic, you talked about my master's in professional writing. One of the things you learn about in narrative fiction, storytelling, playwriting, the character is placed under tremendous, the hero is placed under tremendous pressure. Why? Because inside pressure, character is revealed. And so for you too, if you look back at times you were under stress and strain, what did you do? How did you behave? What priorities helped you kind of deal with it? That might give you some sense of this. following decisions. Look at major decisions, right? We see one's values and what we value when they're faced with a choice. And so if you think about big decision points in your life and you chose the one thing over another, I would suggest to you that what you truly care about and what matters may be revealed in those choices. And you know, throughout life, we're faced with a lot of big choices you've made. And then following your bliss, this goes to a famous author named Joseph Campbell. And his idea was that one's meaning and purpose are revealed to us based on when we lose a sense of time, when we feel joy. So if you think about the high points of your life, right? We started with the struggles. You think about the high points and what you were doing at the time. Very often, that's kind of a great signal that you're doing something that matters and is meaningful to you and that you truly enjoy. So those are a few places to start. So when it comes to the essay concept, you know, with HBS, we went for a list and we narrowed that list, and then we tested the list, and we, you know, kind of let the idea for the essay or the concept for the essay emerge. Same thing with Stanford, though. I think if you can write down in a few sentences before you start, you know, the actual essay writing and storytelling process, why and how, if you can figure those things out in a few sentences and again be able to explain to your best friend, this is what I'm going to write about. The what is that clear statement. It's the answer of what matters. And I encourage people, go beyond the superficial. You know, what matters, helping others. You're really going to have trouble writing that essay because it's very broad and it's very general. Why? You know, this is part of the question, and you know, kind of a key thing that I've heard from Stanford admissions directors. Don't forget the why. Tell us why this matters. Tell us the roots of it. You know, where was this influence or the seed planted? And then the how, I take that as the show me part of this, right? Remember what Kirsten Moss said. I want to see the experiences, right? So you can tell me that this matters to you, but unless you can show me, unless I can sort of see it in action in your life, how am I to understand it, and how am I to sort of believe it? So these are the reasons to believe this really matters to you. So from there, you start to write your stories, and these turn out to be, I think this is where I give Stanford a lot of credit, some of the most personal and interesting and fascinating stories you can read about a person, right? I've seen them take a lot of different forms. I think the show me stories are very interesting. This is where you maybe have a main idea or the what matters most. I had a client who wrote about, you know, I'm paraphrasing, but making the impossible possible. She shared 3 different situations in life where she was faced with something that seemed unachievable. You know, maybe she believed it was impossible. Others told her it was impossible, but she managed through her own talents and gifts and abilities to make them possible. And these were, you know, fascinating stories. We got 3 different vignettes from 3 different times of her life, and ultimately we were like really impressed. Right, this is somebody who can make the impossible possible. That's a, you know, that should be a Stanford fit quality. Cause-centered stories. These, you know, tend to be the more sort of classic, you know, an example of a client who wrote about empowering young women. You know, she came from a family that didn't support her, didn't believe her, didn't empower her. And she did have one family member, though, who did, you know, kind of broke ranks. And she credited this individual with really giving her some confidence and that push that she needed. And now she did that for others in lots of really, you know, powerful ways. She gave examples of that in the story she showed us. Turning point stories. You know, if you've had the, you know, I worked with somebody who was a gifted college athlete, had a career-ending injury, was at his lowest point, and took a church mission trip to Africa, and it, you know, it changed the course of his life. Not just the experience itself, but we saw what happened, who he was before that trip and after that. Huge turning point occurred in his life, and it became a very, you know, sort of powerful story. I wish I could talk more about Stanford Essay. It's fascinating to talk about, but we're gonna move on to Wharton, and but I'll pause for a quick question.
Yeah, let's before we move on to Wharton, I wonder if you could answer, out of, you know, all the thousands of applications you've been through, what are some of the more common mistakes you've seen when approaching this Stanford question?
Yeah. You know, I think, you know, starting with that question I said will trip you up on probably any one of these essays, you know, starting externally, what is this, you know, what are they looking for? What do they want to hear? Isn't the place to look for your answer to what matters most. It really is an internal, you know, search, right? And it's Derek Bolton, who was the predecessor of Kirsten Moss, said this is an accounting exercise, not a marketing exercise. He was talking about Stanford SAA, meaning, you know, that's where the reasons to believe. You know, be able to show me do an accounting of your life, not kind of a sales job for the admissions officer. I think the biggest mistake is giving up. Like, this is hard. I can't come up with a philosophical answer to what matters most to me. It's too hard. I'm not equipped. I'm not going to apply to Stanford. That's a huge mistake, because I tell you, without exception, every one of my clients has struggled with this question. It's a struggle. It's meant to be. It's not meant to be something that you can sort of pluck from the air in your answer wise, and it's not easy. Even once you figured out what matters most to you, Nathan, being able to articulate that and illustrate that to another person, that's a hard exercise. So, you know, giving up is probably the biggest mistake.
Yeah, okay, great. Let's move on into Wharton now.
Okay, well, I saved Wharton, last but not least, but, you know, it is a classic question that's been around for years. You know, why Wharton, right? What do you hope to gain professionally from the Wharton MBA? Is a form of that, you know, kind of why MBA, why our school question. What I like about it, though, and you know, how it may have sort of changed from the sort of just typical, you know, why do you want to go to our school, is that, you know, it's defined in gains. What are you looking to gain from the experience? And we'll delve a little bit deeper into that in just a second. But as you know, by now, we're going to start with fit qualities. I found that Wharton was not as direct, if you will. You know, if you search around the Wharton website, you're not going to just find the page, you know, what are we looking for? But been working on Wharton apps for several years, and I think there are some common denominators. Analytical intelligence, right? Wharton really does care about the quantitative abilities, very quantitatively rigorous and based. Not just a finance school anymore, but still, I think that analytical intelligence is crucial. They promoted the idea, and I think it's still there in the DNA of the school, you know, the knowledge into action. They're looking for folks who can take knowledge and make things happen with it, right? So if you're that type of person, I think you're a good fit with Wharton. And then clarity of purpose, I think this aligns with the essay question itself. Do you know where you're going? Are you going to hit the ground running at Wharton? Wharton's a great school, tons of great resources. You could be sort of overwhelmed and not know what direction to take if you haven't done some thinking ahead of time about where you're going, which I think is a great way, segue into the question itself. But let's hear from Blair Mannix. She's the Wharton admissions director. She had a really interesting podcast. This was hosted on a website called Clear Admit. The quote itself is a little hard to, but I'll paraphrase. She described for a lot of applicants, it starts with a pivot moment. And this is sort of a story where they realized an MBA was critical. And then through further research and analysis, realized a Wharton MBA was critical to where they were going. But they had that self-awareness moment. They realized, hey, there are things that I need to learn to achieve my goals, get where I'm going. And they're very clear on how they want to use what they're going to learn for the future, right? All of those things need to be true, and then you can write you can write a successful essay. So the pivot moment is a phrase that I took from Blair Mannix herself, and that is that sort of moment where you realize, hey, I need to go in a new direction, or I need new skills and tools and knowledge to go in the direction that I want to go. Envisioning your dream job, that's part of forming your concept. I find very hard to write to help my clients with this Wharton essay if they haven't done some career visioning or career goals work ahead of time. So that's actually where we start. Where do you want to go? Because once they've got that figured out, it's easier to sort of say, hey, this is is what I don't have, this is what I need, this is what I'm going to need to equip myself with at Wharton. And a couple of just tips of, so I get the question of, okay, well, how do I figure out what I need to gain professionally? I think informational interviews are a great resource. Talk to somebody who's 10 years ahead, you know, in your dream job, and ask them what skills and knowledge and tools they use every day. If they went to business school, all the better. Ask them what did they gain from the business school experience that really they use day to day, and it's kind of been essential to their success. So, you know, figuring that out at a you know, kind of a big picture level, what do I need, is super helpful. If you can't find those folks, read about them. You know, mirroring successful individuals and sort of seeing, well, you know, articles written about this particular business leader who's doing things that you really dream about doing. What are the, you know, what talents, you know, what's their leadership style? What, you know, skill sets are really at the ground, and kind of grounding or the foundation of what they do. That's another way to kind of attack this. But you want to walk away, right, with a pretty clear sense of what you need to get from Wharton, and then you can do your research, right? So yes, you know, before starting writing, before we had like a, you know, a brief encapsulation, I think build 5 or 6 or 7 great arguments. And by that, I mean, you know, fully formed arguments about, that have these 3 things: what you need to gain, why it's essential for your future, and how you're going to gain that at Wharton. We're a little short in time, so I'm not going to dive into all of those, but I think, you know, if you think about, you know, building 6 or 7 arguments for your case, and that's really what Wharton is in ways. It's a little bit more of a case, persuasive case than a story. You know, you want the admissions officer at the end of it to be persuaded that you know where you're going, you know what you need for the journey, and that you've done enough research and dug below the surface to understand what Wharton's distinctive resources and assets are, how you're going to equip yourself, right? From there, I think you can really answer in a fulsome way what you need to gain professionally at Wharton, and really create an essay that shows them that you've got a direction and you're going to hit the ground running, and you're going to take full advantage of Wharton to get that journey started. We don't have time to talk about it today, but Wharton Essay 2, there's a chance to tell a story. It's about an impactful experience and how from that experience you'll be able to contribute to your Wharton class and the Wharton community. So we'll have some Q&A, but you know, we started with sort of those 3 blocks: the strategy, the concept, and the story. It really begins, if I'm, you know, taking it back to the folks that are out there listening, and you know, what do I do now, Tyler? First, start with that seeking to understand your audience. I gave you a sense of that qualities, looking at quotes, reading about it. I think that's important, right? Understand what they care about. You might get more don'ts than do's from that, but at least you know where the don'ts are, what to avoid, and what they really are. You know, understanding what's being asked. You know, I did some talking today about how to think about this essay. What are they really asking me? What are they trying to get at? Hopefully, both in terms of the strategy, the concept, and the story, you now have a better understanding than you did 45 minutes ago about what you know, what's being asked in these 3 core questions. And then, you know, it's all does come down to a great, you know, telling a great story, your story, right? Something that's unique, something that reveals who you are. We really get to know you. It adds new information. And, you know, it achieves our #1 communication objective, essay strategy, however you want to phrase it. It's going to persuade the reader that you've got something to bring to this class, or many things to bring to the class. You can enrich, you can contribute. Having you around is going to make everybody else's experience at Wharton or Stanford or Harvard that much richer. And ultimately, if you can do that, I think you're certainly on your way to an interview invitation. And we'll hopefully have a couple more questions. I realize we're kind of right at time. Nathan, want to invite folks, of course, to visit us at mbaprepschool.com. You'll find essay tips and analysis that reflect and add to and enrich a lot of the things that I couldn't talk about today, didn't have the time. But hopefully this overview will get a lot of folks moving in the right direction and telling great stories.
Yeah, let's, maybe we have time for one question. I don't know if you wanted to flip off of the screen share
Sure.
so they can see your face. There we go. Yeah, so just kind of jumping back, and we hit upon this a little bit, but just sitting down practically to start these different essays, what are some things that the applicants should be considering asking themselves as they're starting to have this personal reflection that's required to dive into these essays? So just ground zero, what are some things that they should really consider and ask themselves before they move into this process?
Sure. Well, again, I think that working on your resume and really figuring out who your references are, and at least imagining some of the ground and territory that will cover is a great way just to know what the givens are, what's already on the record, right? We talked a little bit about that in different ways in each of these essays. So then from there, I really do think there's a brainstorming process, and depending on the essay question, that brainstorming might have a little bit of different shape or form. With the Harvard essay, I think it's a matter of saying, look, am I going to write about life experiences or passion or a little bit of a personal statement that shares a value, or am I going to try to connect the dots to the reader in ways that my resume can't? In other words, that particular essay really does come down to sort of figuring out what you're going to do to add to the picture. Stanford's search is a little different, and that's where that slide came in about following your struggles, big decision turning points, things that you truly enjoy, right? So the search process is a little bit different for Stanford. With Wharton, I think it sort of starts with the career visioning and career goals, and then from there, figuring out kind of in big buckets, if you will, things that you need to equip yourself with, and then school research, right? If you've decided, look, I need X, Y, and Z, look for, dig into Wharton's resources, look into their course catalog, look at the clubs they have, look at the different, experiential learning opportunities, map those. If you can map those, you can connect sort of something you need to gain to a point exactly of here it is at Wharton available to me, then you're well on your way to really building kind of a persuasive case for the Wharton essay.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And you'll be answering some more of these questions on your blog, correct? How do the applicants who want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So if you come to MBAPrepSchool.com, we have lots of free resources. We've just pretty recently put our ebook, which used to be for purchase only, on the website, and it will take you through this process from the strengths discovery and the foundations through the essay writing. There's tips about resumes, how to choose your references. That's a great resource, and that'll cover a lot of the bases. For folks who want to work with a consultant or a coach, it sort of starts with a consultation, and there's buttons to sign up for that on the website, and that's getting that initial chat about your admissions goals, how we can help is a great resource. There's an essay, I published on Poets and Quants several articles about essays. So if you search for MBA Prep School on the Poets and Quants website, you'll find about a dozen articles. At the end of each one of those articles is a link to our essay tips and analysis. So that's probably the easiest way to get, there's essay tips written by on Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, Booth. So we kind of do a little bit of what we've done today, but in blog posts and articles. So just hope folks take advantage of all those resources. This is obviously a big challenge, and we're happy to help.
Okay. All right. Great. We are out of time now. Thanks, Tyler. You can find his website at mbaprepschool.com, and of course, you can find his profile on our site, as well as a bunch of other resources at poetsandquants.com. So thanks again for your time, Tyler.
I think there's going to be a recording of this video on the website too. So.
Well, yep, this will be recorded and made available later. Yep.
Wonderful. Thanks
again. All right.
I really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Have a great day.
You too.